So welcome back for a very short part, the part called the taxonomy. So taxonomy is the classification of species, and it's not going to be examined at the during the final exams, but I really want you to be familiar with taxonomy because we are going to use it all the time, and I'm not going to remind you every time what I'm talking about because it's really it's going to be everywhere. So you have to be comfortable right now, and I have to make sure that you are comfortable right now with the classification of species. So taxonomy is the classification of species into taxa. Taxa, which is the plural of taxon. So for example, a species is a taxon, and it's the taxon we are the most used to. A family is another taxon, and we are quite used to it too, but you can see that there are many levels of taxonomy, and every time you can see a species is one sub-component of another taxon, a bigger taxon that is the genus, and inside a genus you can have many species, and in a family you can have many genus. So you can see these are sub-components of each other. And I really want you to be familiar at least with the bottom three, the family, the genus, and the subspecies. So what we call the lower rank taxa. So the family, genus, and species. The higher rank taxa, they are less, we are going to use them a lot less. But at least, yeah, family, genus, species, so that every time I talk about species, every time I talk about a genus or genera in the plural, or family, at least you know what I'm talking about. So here you have an example. So Homo sapiens, the human, modern human. Sapiens is the species of the genus Homo, that you can see here, the Homo, and itself belongs to the family, the Hominidae, from the order primates and the mammals, the vertebrates, etc. So the higher up you go, the broader the taxon becomes. So there are many types of primates, many families of primates. There are a couple of families of Hominidae, but there's only one genus Homo, and this species and this genus has one species, Homo sapiens. And same thing for the dog. The dog is Canis lupus. So lupus is the species, Canis is the genus. The genus Canis has many species, the wolf, the coyote, the jackal. And Canis in itself belongs to a family, a broader family called the Canidae, so the family of the dogs. So everything that looks like a dog is a Canidae. And then you have the carnivora, which are all the carnivorous mammals, the mammals which are themselves a member of a bigger taxon called the vertebrates, etc. So every time you feel lost about the taxonomy, I strongly suggest you to go back to this slide and really study it and be comfortable with that. Because if you are not comfortable with that, then there's very little things you can possibly understand. And as I say, we don't have time to go back every time to this concept, the concept of taxonomy. So you have to make yourself comfortable with that. As I said, it's not going to be examined. I'm not going to give you this to give it back by heart. I don't want you to remember that. I want you to understand that. Because you need to understand it to understand everything else. That's the basis. And as I was saying, the lower ranks will be more important than the higher ranks. So just an example for you. This is Tyrannosaurus rex. And Tyrannosaurus rex is one of the most famous species. So the species is Rex, and the genus is Tyrannosaurus. So now you know what genus and species are like. Now, another thing that is important is how you write it. Because there's only one way to write it, and it's Tyrannosaurus, so the genus with a capital T, and Rex with a small R. So, and you can see here, every time the genus has a capital letter, but not the species. The genus has a capital letter, Homo, but not the species, Sapiens. So there's only one way to write Tyrannosaurus rex that is correct. It's like this, Tyrannosaurus rex. But then you can use abbreviations, and I will use a lot of abbreviations, so that's why I need to tell you now the kind of abbreviations I'm going to give you. So Tyrannosaurus rex can be abbreviated into Tyrannosaurus, so I just use the genus name but not the species. Anyway, Tyrannosaurus has only one species, which is Rex. So it's like Homo Sapiens. There's just one species and it's Homo. And you can abbreviate it as T.Rex or T full stop Rex. So T full stop Rex is the abbreviation of Tyrannosaurus Rex. And that's why you put a capital T, so that you know it refers to capital T of Tyrannosaurus. Now, you don't write it with two capitals. That's wrong. You don't write it with this. That's wrong. And you don't write Rex alone. That's also wrong. So now it's up to you. So now, sorry, it's not yet the quiz. The quiz comes after that. First, the conclusion. So another thing you need to know about taxonomy is that taxonomy are arbitrary. Any classification is arbitrary. It was made by people for convenience. So you will see that sometimes during this class you may be disturbed by some concept, how the species were delineated, how we decided that this was a different species from another thing. The answer is classification is arbitrary. So we decide what we want to put in what box. And we have criteria for that. So the criteria helps to make it a little less arbitrary. So for modern species, the criteria is interbreeding. So if two individuals can interbreed and produce a fertile offspring, so an offspring, a baby that can itself reproduce with another member of one species or another, and make a baby, then these two individuals are considered the same species. For example, here is a donkey, so it's half a zebra and half a donkey, but this animal cannot make babies. It's not fertile. So the zebra and the donkey are two different species. Now, with fossil species, we have a problem. We have a problem because we don't know if they can interbreed or not, because these animals are mostly extinct, except for the few species, modern species that have a fossil record. But for fossil species, we cannot know if they were capable of interbreeding. So how do we decide that, for example, Tyrannosaurus rex is a different species from any other dinosaur? We use morphology. The limit is morphology. So two individuals are considered the same species if they look similar enough, and at least like they would do in modern species. So it's the principle of actualism. So in your geology class, you've probably used the principle of actualism. Things that happen today were likely to happen in the same way in the past. That's the principle of actualism. Things that happen today were likely to happen the same way in the past. And it's the same thing for species. Usually when two species cannot interbreed or cannot produce a fertile offspring, they usually look very different. Again, the zebra and the donkey, they look quite different, morphologically speaking. So their morphology is different. And if we find in the fossil record two species that are different enough so that we can make the decision that they are different species, then we consider them just two different species. So it's just the way they look, basically. And we decide, from the way they look, we decide if they are different species or not. So that's how we do taxonomy with fossil species. So now it's the time for the quiz. See you in the next video.